All right, what's up, sailors? So this originally was going to be a video about Benjamin Hornigold, because I think he's a really cool 30-point commander that has some really nice tools. But I started thinking about his faction. Well, I shouldn't say faction; his force, British privateers, and how it has access to some really interesting tools. And we're going to get into that as we go further into the video. I want to just start with Benjamin Hornigold as a commander. I think he's a really interesting piece. As you can see here, the stats wise, he's a 3-point commander. He's only got a 12-inch command range, which means he's probably going to command a single boat, which is fine. He doesn't have to exert a huge command radius to command a boat. But 12 inches is enough to throw commands from one end of a frigate to another. So he comes with an extra fortune point. So that's God's blessing or devil's luck. Basically, he starts with 4 fortune, which is really nice to have that 4 fortune in case you need something to go your way. I was just thinking the general rule for fortune, if you have a lot of it, you don't know when to spend it. One way to do this is if at least once you're going to have a below average attack roll, and you're going to be able to math out quickly in your head what the average would be as opposed to what you just rolled. And so that's a good way to have a gauge on whether you spend your fortune or not. So it's an easy example here would be, let's say you have 10 hits or 10 attacks, right? 10 musket shots, and you're hitting on, let's say, 7s, right? So that's 40%. So if you roll out your 10 shots and you get less than 4 hits, you know that if you spend fortune, you have a chance to roll closer to the average. So, and who knows, it may spike as well because there's obviously, it's a bell curve. So, just you have a lower percentage of rolling worse the worse you roll. So it's better to, in that sense, it's better to bring low rolls up to the average than it is to try to go for haymakers. Although I shouldn't discourage you from going for haymakers. Sometimes you really need something to go your way, and that's when fortune is really helpful. I think it's especially true when you take fatigue that would leave you shaken, especially like on a cannon crew. You then go for the gusto and you try to say, okay, well, if I need to roll these 2 off and I just have to try, I think it's worth spending a fortune there. Unfortunately, we're not pirates. We don't have the lucky trait. Lucky lets you throw it back into your pile, throw the fortune back into your pile if you don't get a better result than you first intended. So really shout outs to lucky. That's a really good trait, but we don't have lucky on Benjamin. That'd be kind of crazy if we did. We have some other great stuff, though, for Benjamin. He has Inspiring, just native, which is, it's an ability that it's kind of rare for British privateer buccaneers outside of the generics. A lot of times you just see, you take the 10-point generic for its 2 command points and you get the Inspiring keyword because it's hard to find elsewhere for non-Spanish factions. If I'm playing Spain, I'm probably going to take a Hidalgo. I'm going to take not Hidalgo, but the Mission Priest, because Mission Priest gives Inspiring, and you can take like Bold or something, which is a nice segue because that's what Benjamin has. He has the Bold keyword, which we'll get into in just a second. And Bold is a great thing for him. Let me scroll down here. Bold is a great thing for him because you're kind of protecting your investment. Anytime I take a 3-point commander, my opponent's probably going to look to shake that unit because shaken units normally don't get to use their command points until they become unshaken. And Bold is sort of a way to protect that investment. You can also use your command points outside of a melee. So if you're looking to get stuck in, which the list we're going to talk about, attached to Benjamin kind of is, you're able to command point with the full breadth of abilities. You don't have to worry about only command pointing in a melee and losing your ability to use your other 2 points. And then of course you have Ruthless attached to Cold Blooded. So the unit that Benjamin Hornigold is in gains Ruthless from him, and then any unit using a command point from this commander to fight or shoot also gains Ruthless. So in an ideal world, you'll have 4 units firing with Ruthless all the time, or most of the time. That's sort of the way I see it. So you got Ben's unit who's firing off with Ruthless, then you got 1, 2, 3 command points, and all 3 of those command points are going to be shoot actions or fight actions, and those fight actions are going to be activating cold-blooded, and that's kind of the high overview of how Ben, in my opinion, works. Let's look at the force that he's in. So he's in British Privateers, which is kind of it's sort of the natural evolution of the English Buccaneers from No Peace Beyond the Line. You get, in a sense, a bonus fortune by being able to discard all of your cards in your hand and replace them if you need to, and that can be really pivotal. I think a lot of games I've played of Blood and Plunder often are won or lost by having initiative at a pivotal moment, and so this ability is super helpful. If you draw a hand and you're not confident you can go first, you just ditch your hand and try again for no fortune. So that's super handy. And then, of course, you have the rule that all trained and veteran units gain hard chargers, which is a rule from like New England Privateers and some other of the British factions. That's already good, but it stacks with cold-blooded. So this is a case of number go down, and number go down is always good in Blood and Plunder. We like number go down, and if you have hard chargers plus ruthless, number go down by 2. So we love that. We'll get into that later in some of the stuff that we can pull off with hard chargers, ruthless together. And then, of course, the force adds +2 in determining the attacker. Kind of important to do that. If you really do want, I think in this list, you want the weather gauge. You want to be able to sail large at your opponent with a fast ship like a frigate or a sloop of war, and just go crazy at close range and start wrecking house with your core units. The supports in the faction are not really that great. Let's actually talk about the let's go down here and talk about the support and core selection. So you got access to Sea Dogs, which is your standard English sailor. You got access to able seamen, who are like sort of an elite British sailor. They're kind of like a mix of Enterplague and or Plogue. I don't know how you say that. I still don't know. They're kind of a mix of Enterplogue and sort of it's not like a reverse freebooter, kind of, because they have a 7/6 shoot. I love the fact that they have 6 on both save categories, because if you're playing aboard big ships, you'll have hard cover. So you'll have a 60% chance to save. It means you'll have a really easy time getting to target because you're saving, you're deflecting 60% of all incoming hits. And then on top of that, you're probably on board a frigate with 5 fortitude. So 5 fortitude is super helpful for resisting cannon damage. So if you're trying to sail against a cannon list, you'll have your frigate with its 5 fortitude. Cannonballs are going to come flying in, but you'll be able to resist damage because you not only do you have a really strong hull to resist the damage, you also have a 6 shoot save base, which goes to a 5. And then if you if fatigue starts piling up, they have resolve of 4. So I think able seamen are really interesting. I think one interesting point is that they kind of there's a way to spend points to turn them into freebooters. What you can do with them is you can scroll down here. You can swap your standard brace of pistols for firelocks, for firelock muskets. But then for an additional 2 points for the unit, not per model, for the unit, you can give yourself a pistol sidearm. So you're basically turned into a freebooter with some really interesting stats, like high durability, really high resolve. And it's not that crazy of an expense, especially if you downgrade to trained. So like if let's say you want a unit of 8, that's not bad. Like 42, considering that, normally a freebooter, if you have a freebooter with sort of I don't know, worse stats isn't really the way to put it. It's different stats, because freebooters have marksman, but marksman I find is action hungry, and I think if you're trying to get to the target to get into a fight, that 6 shoot save is a godsend. It makes you better at attrition. I think being better at attrition is actually more effective overall than marksman, because that 6 shoot save is on all the time, as opposed to the marksman being on only when you can spare actions to activate it. And then you're just also less expensive per model. Like you can get 8 able seamen with this combo, as opposed to the freebooters, which you have to buy 7 of them because they're 6 points base. So you have to buy 7 of them normally. The difference being that freebooters have ball and shot, which is it's a good ability if you get close enough, but I don't know. I haven't really found it to be that effective, and I think this is kind of an interesting angle to take on able seamen as musketeers with pistol sidearms. But we're going to talk about a unit that is, I really think, the star of the show. This little guy, Jamaican privateer. They are sort of like the natural evolution of freebooters. They give up lots of keywords. They don't have a lot of offensive attributes, but they do get expert sailor, which is really, really good if you have a bunch of them standing around to do advanced maneuvers and changing the sails and just taking care of the ship and moving the ship around. For 4 points, you get trained, which means in this force you get hard charger, and then they have a 6/6 on the fight, which is crazy good for their cost. And then you have shoot 7/7, resolve 5. They're basically like your sort of standard sailors. But I think what really makes the difference for them is that they get sidearm pistol for basically nothing. They just don't pay for it. That's kind of their thing. Firelock muskets and standard melee weapons. So you get your 7 shoot, which is kind of standard on a lot of sailors, is a 7 shoot. But if you have less fatigue and you activate with cold blooded, suddenly you have ruthless. So that puts you down to a 6, which means you're as good as a European sailor if you have ruthless active, which is sort of the same theory behind the winning list at Adepticon, which I'm gonna get into in just a second. I want to make sure I go through everything about Hornigold before I move on to that part of the video. Hornigold, yeah. So I talked a little bit about Bold. Bold is just a great insurance policy. Maybe I mentioned it before. A lot of times, if your 3-point commander's unit starts shaking, you're kind of just screwed. But you get around it with Bold, and Bold is seriously good, even if you're just using it to throw command points out of melee. Talked a little bit about cold blooded plus hard charger for number go down. So let me talk a little bit about why pistol sidearm is important here. So on the one hand, you can shoot your firelocks and with Jamaicans, and you can still have defensive fire because you have a sidearm pistol. You can just whip out your pistol and shoot incoming boarders. But the other side of this is that your single shot pistol, you can synergize this all together. So like if you're going over the rail, like boarding your opponent's ship, and you're trained, you get hard chargers. But then you have cold blooded because Hornigold told you to do it. So you go down to a 5 fight. Maybe you have ruthless. So you have hard chargers put you down to a 5 fight. You have ruthless put you down to a 4 fight. And then if you have a pistol handy, you can reroll because you get the pistol reroll in combat, the one-off. And often that's enough to utterly break an opponent's unit. Like that's the trick. And here's another cool thing about Jamaicans is that you can give them stink pots. So if you really wanted to, you could just spam out a bunch of Jamaican privateers, give a few of them stink pots, and then when you combine, if you leave them trained to give them hard chargers and Hornigold's abilities, you're pretty set. Now I will say this: hard chargers is a totally it's kind of optional. One angle on this would be to just have as many dudes as possible because a lot of times like ship to ship combat is attrition based, and not only do you have a bunch of dudes with a six fight save, who are cheap, you could also make them even cheaper because you can downgrade Jamaicans to inexperienced. And so much like Dan Carlson's Brethren of the Coast list with his varied experience, we can get to inexperience on the Jamaicans and really start piling the bodies in there. So what does... Oh, I forgot one more thing about Hornigold. So cold-blooded doesn't work on artillery, so it kind of discourages you from using cannon lists with Hornigold. Hornigold really wants to avoid artillery. He wants to get as much mileage as possible out of his cold-blooded. So you're going to be using musket lists, primarily small arms boarding lists. Maybe you include like token artillery. Like I could see an argument for like the double swivel pair on the front of a brigantine or a sloop of war, for example. That I could see an argument for that because you can get 3 swivels on target every so often, and that gives you a 9 die volley for 6 dudes who are manning the swivels. That's generally what I do. But that's kind of a part one of the video. It kind of sums it up. But I'm going to come back in just a minute, and we're going to talk about some of the, like, what does this look like, list building in practice. All right, we're back with part two. This is Blood and Pigment's website. This is an article that Dan Carlson, the winner of the Adepticon C tournament, wrote about his winning run. He says his list is historically inspired by his reading of Benderson Little, Sea Rover's Practice, which is sort of like the seminal book and history source for the game. It's a very interesting quote here from Benderson Little. Sea Rover's Practice says 20 men with muskets might do more damage to the prey's crew than a single 6-pound shot, something far more expensive than 20 cartridges of powder and ball. So that is kind of the clue, the big clue to what Dan was doing with his list here. He says that he read Sea Rover's Practice. He wanted to do a 17th century faction focusing on muskets and small arms. And so he said, okay, let's do Brethren of the Coast. Due to the faction having access to just about every naval unit for no peace beyond the line. From there, I needed to figure out who to bring. This is his awesome frigate, by the way, with a pinnace front. It looks really nice. Huge props to I love the triangular lateen sail in contrast to the other sails. It's really nice looking. So he says, I picked Mike Tunez's brain regarding the 17th century factions and units, and as the 18th century has seemed to taken over and is preferred by most of the players I was seeing. He said have rules like ruthless and hard chargers. There you go, number go down. And that while pistols are great to have in combat, stripping them away wouldn't ruin a sailor's combat effectiveness so long as I was on the offensive. Now that is true, but I have a different opinion. I think that having pistol sidearms gives you the flexibility to not even care about whether you're unloaded or not. And Jamaicans get it for free, basically. They don't have to worry about whether they're unloaded with their muskets, because they can always do the one shot, either defensive fire or one shot offensive reroll. So sidearm pistol is just pure value for Jamaicans. So that is the one way that I would diverge if I was going to build a Hornigold list that had kind of a similar theme to Dan's list. That's sort of the objective here for the second part of the video. He says, from there, I decided that I would probably be matched up against cannon lists and decided I needed to have as many models as possible to offset casualties and to have enough units to handle repairs and advanced maneuvers. And from there, the list took shape. Now, frigates really good at resisting cannon fire. We talked in part one about how having a 6 shoot save with an able seaman plus the row of fortitude there makes your units highly resistant to taking damage from round shot. And well, grape shot as well, because grape shot, you still have your 60% save in hard cover because you had a 6 shoot base. You'll see that in Dan's list, which we'll scroll to here, he doesn't really have a lot of things that save on a 6 on shoot. Because I don't know if you can see this on the video well enough to do it, but I'll read it off in case you can't actually see it on the video. But his unit is 3 units of Marineros, I'm guessing with rifles, a unit of Marines, and then Sea Dogs and Capers. So a lot of 6 shoot, a lot of ruthless, using the Brethren of the Coast's varied experience rule to downgrade the Marineros to inexperienced. And so there's a lot I could say about that. Having a 3-point musketeer with ruthless on all the time, with a 5-fight base, like already excellent, right? And then of course, if you're on the attack, and you're charging in with your 5-fight, or if you have Marines, you have a 5 with hard chargers as well. You're going to do pretty good on the attack. You're basically trying to gain initiative, and you're trying to attack your opponent and say, I'm going to do as much damage to you as possible. And then sure, I'll take some attrition, but I'll take some attrition back. But because I swung first, I'm dictating the terms of the fight. And it really does come down to, I think, winning initiative on critical turns. He's got a ton of musketeers. I think he says he has 40 musketeers in this list. And I don't know if you can read it there, but it's got 57 models total. So it's just cramming him in on this frigate. And he's using that sort of frigate with fresh green hull. He's also using the Pacific Adventure characters. These guys are kind of the secret sauce. It's basically for the cost of 10 points, you basically gain 3 open command points, and the price that you pay is that those units can only take commands from their own fighting man because of shifting command. Pacific Adventure characters are subject of debate, I would say. I think some people, there's definitely a faction that says they need to go up because the open command point is really, really strong. Something he didn't use here that I also think is strong is Unknown African, but I think it's not, it doesn't synergize with his list as well as like characters like Richard Sawkins, who you can give impulsive to, so you get the free grapple attempt. And of course, you have John Watling and John Coxon with Inspiring, and then Watling is just a free open command point. So a lot to be said about those Pacific Adventure characters, probably beyond the scope of the video. But just know that they exist in Brethren and English Bucks, and you may encounter them, and they're generally very strong. He also has a standard bearer just for an additional command point at the cost of some of his one of his muskets, which is fine. He says here, the real bread and butter are all the Pacific Adventure characters. By attaching a character to each unit of Marineros, I effectively made them behave like trained units despite being inexperienced. This allowed them to be self-sufficient and allowed my commander with Inspiring to hand out rally command points and bark, repair, or grapple orders to the Marines and the Sea Dogs. The real kicker is that every unit on the ship has either sailors or expert sailors, meaning any advanced maneuvers or change sail settings actions were taken care of with ease. Yes, so those expert sailors really does help when you're trying to move up wind or do any sort of like advanced maneuver. Then, of course, if you need to change sail, you can also reroll, or not reroll, but you get the bonus with expert sailor. I chose the light frigate for its speed and durability. I had a freshly careened hull to help me close the distance. It has great maneuverability, fortitude, speed, and sail settings, and it is my second favorite hull type. And then Dan starts getting into tactics, and I don't completely follow everything he's doing here, but I get what he's going for, because again, he makes some points that I've made. So, like, for example, Sea Dogs with a 6 fight save are going to be a pain to kill off. Marine hard chargers are going to come in if you have no defensive fire. You're just cooked, because you're going to get hit with a 4 fight. And Ruthless and all the Marineros mean they could do in melee combat. You basically sail. They set me up for a list. They could fire off volleys at mid range and then close them for the kill. So the overall strategy here is you take your frigate, you try to get the weather gauge, you sail at your opponent, you come in at mid range, you spam out all your musket fire to try to get as much fatigue on the enemy as possible, and then you think about boarding. So that's kind of the idea of it. And the lack of cannons doesn't really slow you down because you have so many muskets. And like we said, he has 40 musket models on this. And I guess now we're going to talk about how this applies to Benjamin, because I was going to build out a Benjamin list sort of along these lines. I think Benjamin has the ability to do similar tactics, maybe not as many dudes because you're not using the inexperienced privateers, but again, like, there's ways to do it that don't necessarily need to be you don't necessarily need hard chargers because you're already fighting on a 6, and with Ruthless you're fighting on a 5 from the command point. So it could be that number go down, ends up being overkill sometimes. A 5 with reroll is plenty strong on the offensive, and again, like, you get the option to reroll because you have the soldering pistol. So different. It's a sort of a how to say it? It's a different path to a similar circumstance, I would say. So we take Benjamin, we take British privateers, we take a light frigate. We're looking to get 6 units on board this vessel. A light frigate, you definitely take freshly careened because you want that free move at the top of the game. I don't think the frigate needs anything else on board. You're not really looking to take any artillery. You might want to take a cook if you can squeeze it in there, just to get the extra rally command point for those units that need to rally. Cook is just crazy. I think it's crazy value for 2 points if you have the ability to spare it. Okay, so this is kind of a first pass at the Benjamin Hornigold list I'm talking about. It looks pretty degenerate to me. I mean, that's a good thing if you're trying to win a tournament, but I don't know if your opponents are going to have the most fun playing against this because there's just so many dudes with muskets. We're closing in on 60 dudes with muskets in this list. Just pack a frigate full of all these guys, and I know I said a lot about hard chargers in the video, but There's only one unit that utilizes hard chargers bonus, and that's going to be the Able Seaman, which you're probably going to put Benjamin in, just because they have 4 resolve, and so you're not going to be shaken most of the time. If you have to take a rally, you got a 4 resolve rerolling with inspiring, so it's unlikely you're going to get shaken at any point. But yeah, like everybody on the boat has a musket, so you can just sail your opponent with your speed 5 frigate and just blast them with muskets. And then if you are able to dish out some ruthless from Benjamin, it just becomes even more potent. Again, the Able Seamen have muskets; they shoot on a 7, just like everybody else. So you close in, you start ruthlessing. You're gonna do some damage for sure. So this is just my pass. I had to check the deck capacities just to make sure I was able to fit enough people. So a frigate is a 3-deck ship. You've got on the front deck, you've got about 18 models, so you can put 2 units of 9 privateers, inexperienced. On the middle deck, you can put your Able Seaman unit with Benjamin, and then you have your 11 inexperienced Jamaican privateers on the second unit in the thing, and then on the rear deck, you can fit another 18 Jamaicans. So you've got here you got 57 models. Benjamin doesn't have a musket, so he's apparently doesn't know how to use one. So yeah, I think this is a pretty awesome starting point. I don't think it's the best list ever, but I think it's pretty darn strong. I think it could give Dan's list a run for its money. It just has 10 more muskets, basically. It doesn't have as much melee punch, but I do have rerolls from the pistols, and I do have the ability to do defensive fire in case he tries to board me. I have a lot more options for defensive fire, and I have so at least the Able Seamen have good resolve, so the chances are they won't be fatigued when things come down to it, or when boarding actions starts. So yeah, I really think that like if the Able Seamen can get the ruthless hard chargers off, you'll have 4 with a reroll, and that's usually going to be enough to, if you roll well, that's usually enough to break an opponent's unit pretty quickly on the charge. Most things don't survive 4s with rerolls, I find, even in hardcover, unless they're like, unless they get a really good save. But most things don't survive being charged like that. And then, of course, you can command point yourself to do it, to fight again if you really need to, without the benefit of your pistols. But it should be more than enough. One thing this list doesn't have is a model with impulsive. We don't have access to Hidalgo. We also don't have access to Richard Sawkins from Brethren. The reason I bring that up is because impulsive gives you a free grapple because you have to attempt to make a charge. So, and as part of that attempt to make a charge, you can do a free grapple attempt. So that's worth mentioning because I've used that tech on a few of my boarding lists to get the free grapple in there. Another thing this list doesn't do, which the Brethren list that Dan does do, is he's got the extra command points from his characters, and so you'll have some of your privateers losing some economy there. They won't act like trained units when they have to reload their muskets, but you just have more guys. So the answer is more dudes and more cheap dudes, as far as this list goes. And you'll just overwhelm your opponent with the number of dudes that you have, a number of muskets, musket shots you can bring to bear. Yeah, that's my swipe at Benjamin Hornigold here, and hopefully it had helped some of you think about your list building. And that's been the early morning ramblings of this Sea Dog, and we'll see you around.